In further Nintendo news, they actually released their quarterly fiscal report for the first part of the financial year for them. Probably big things I just wanted to call out that they had just an absolute bumper in terms of sales. So in terms of profits themselves, it basically doubled in that year-on-year period. So just super indicates two things. From a COVID perspective, people are just buying these games like crazy, and that Animal Crossing is just absolutely dominating from that space. And now the Nintendo Switch is at 61 million sales worldwide, and by this stage even it's probably past the NES. So it's I kind of wanted to raise this just to get the answer from you, or just what your thoughts are. Do you think that the Switch will go on to be 100+ million seller?
It wouldn't surprise me because they've still got a couple of big hitters left. Now, nothing probably of the level of Animal Crossing, because I don't think your Breath of the Wild 2 is probably going to be that huge for that. But it wouldn't surprise me, although they have kind of used a lot of their aces at this point. Metroid Prime 4 is not going to move that amount of Switches. So it'll be interesting, but it just goes to show that never, I guess, underestimate Nintendo.
Yes.
Everyone was kind of like, oh, the Switch, we'll see how it goes and everything, when, the Wii U didn't go so great. And just look at it now. It's one of their top 3 consoles probably of all time at this point. So
Yeah, I think every 5 years people talk about the demise of Nintendo, and it's a company that's been around for 130 years. I think the company is like really built to last, like in a very long sense, not a short-term sense at all. It's a 20, 30-year kind of direction that they have with these things. I'll go on the record to say I think that they will get past 100 million, because I really feel like with this whole COVID situation, it's a bit like what happened with the GFC, where the GFC kind of delayed people in either getting a new console or extended the generation. Now, that hasn't impacted Xbox and PlayStation because they're already on their way to release a new generation. But I think if it was any earlier, they probably wouldn't have gone down the path to create another generation. Whereas I think Nintendo, given it's kind of happened now in the 3-year mark for them, they'll release like a Switch Pro, and I just think that will carry them. And I don't even think it's a game thing. I think it's just I'm hearing people I never expected to buy a console, and they're sort of like, hey, I've got a Nintendo Switch. I was just like, wow, really? Like, you're not even into gaming. Like, what's going on here?
I just hope if they do make a Switch Pro that they put a proper D-pad on the Joy-Con. I just really hope they do that.
So what I would, like, the number one thing I'd want, even more than a Switch Pro, would be for them to release Pro Joy-Cons or Pro-Cons or whatever they want to call them. Like, if they release like higher quality analog sticks and like a D-pad, man, I'd honestly, if that was like $199, I probably would still buy it.
I mean, there are some
like, as sad as that
there are
sounds.
some third-party options out there that aren't too bad, though, from what I've heard with Joy-Con.
Yeah, I've got the Hori D-pad one, and like I do that when I play Mario Maker on the go, and it's really good. But I just don't like the analog sticks. I find them to be way too, like, they're just not very precise for me. Like, and I'm not the best gamer, so I kind of need to remove as many disadvantages as possible.
Are they taller? Because I've had other Hori controls before, and they always make the analog stick like taller than the standard. Is that the case with the Joy-Con ones as well?
It's imperceptible to me.
Okay.
It's pretty similar. So I find the analog stick to be slightly worse on the Hori, but obviously with the D-pad, it's like hell of a lot better. But it's only slightly worse for me personally, the Hori analog stick. But it's not like terrible. But just to call out, there's a lot of features that the Hori stick doesn't have, or the Joy-Con. Like, it doesn't, you can't use it wirelessly. There's like a whole host of things you can't do with it. Sorry, that's a bit of a bummer. But and just as you talked about Metroid not being a big system seller, it was interesting to see, and quite sad for me as a big Metroid fan, that Animal Crossing New Horizon is already the second most selling game on the Switch with 22 million copies, but it's also outsold the entire library of Metroid. So every Metroid game combined has sold less than Animal Crossing New Horizon, which is just incredible.
Yeah, and it doesn't surprise me at all. Metroid's always been... it's not a cult classic, but it's kind of like if Nintendo had a cult classic upon out within their big IPs, it's the cult classic of their big IPs essentially.
Yeah, yeah. I get what you're saying. Yeah, yeah. I agree. I agree.